Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFirio. I'm your host for the show, and I would invite you to subscribe to the show. Thank you so much for being here, by the way, and supporting the show. But you really should subscribe so you always get notified when new episodes come out. Now, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at the Pacific Barista Series, pacificfoodservice.com, as well as Your Brand Cafe at yourbrandcafe.com. We've all been there. If you find a supplier, you get a quote, and you wait a long time to hear back from them. It comes back in their minimum is more cups than you could ever go through in like 10 years. It's ridiculous. Or you find somebody flexible on quantity, and then you see the shipping cost and your margin goes away. But Your Brand Cafe puts pricing right on the site. There's no quote request, no waiting, no back and forth. There's a one case minimum, not some low minimum generality, just one case. So at Your Brand Cafe, they have free shipping on every custom order if you're getting custom printed cups, sleeves, and other items that Your Brand Cafe has. Check them out at yourbrandcafe.com. It's free shipping on every custom order. You just pick your product, upload your logo, and their team takes it from there. So check them out, yourbrandcafe.com. And today we are also sponsored by our friends at the Pacific Food Service Barista Series. Their line of plant-based beverages are renowned worldwide for standing up to the heat from steaming. They have great texture, and it keeps the flavor balance focused on coffee. So if you're looking for the best plant-based beverage for your customers, check them out over at pacificfoodservice.com. You can get samples, try it for yourself. Now, I want to jump into our content, and the topic of today is all about shifting your mindset. Now, I'm thinking about this because I've been really talking a lot on the show. One of the things I've been doing a lot of is talking about thinking. And half of my job as a consultant, and especially as a coach, specifically, if you want to get detailed about it, coaching is where you help people think about their thinking, to work with people and guide them through the process of great questions, thought processes, and changing the way we approach opportunities, challenges, topics, all of those things. And of course, how you think is a precursor to how you act. I on the webinar for onboarding and training, I made the joke, and I always do this in our lectures, where most of the onboarding material that you get as a barista is almost like you're being onboarded into a prison. And when that joke hits, obviously it's like, I know what you mean. It's exactly how it feels. I asked my lawyer to draft it up, or I downloaded it from a website, and it's really just like this legally binding contract, and it makes you feel a certain way. And sometimes that creates way more problems than it protects you from. And the issue is how your mindset as a barista is, conditioned from the beginning to see the company, but also as an owner, if you have a perception, a mindset towards your staff as liabilities, as problems to be managed, that is going to translate to every interaction that you have. And you'll swear up and down, I'm not passive aggressive, I'm not unapproachable, I'm not a dictator, I'm not whatever. But the way you come across is almost, you can't escape it, because deep down inside, if you have a particular perspective and worldview and people view, mindset, it's not going to be able, you can't hide it. Okay, you're not going to be able to hide it. And that's why we need to pay such close attention to not downstream things. We can redirect the stream, but the water is the water. You've got to purify the source. You've got to go to the fountainhead. You've got to go to where it might be a mind issue. And we're saying mindset, but sometimes you can say it's a heart issue. Sometimes they're one and the same if you really want to get to the heart of it. See what I did there? So I wanted to talk about 4 mindset shifts I think are going to really help you if you are brave enough to explore these things. I say brave enough, and I think about the second oracle in the never-ending story, spoiler alert. Atreyu has to face himself in the mirror to see who he really is. And that's very scary for most people. So, if those of you who get the reference, get the reference. Thanks to my Gen X audience out there. Um, but I want to encourage you to take that on, because if you're going to lead people, you've got to lead yourself. And if all you do is lead yourself to easy things, you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to get better. The purification process of your thoughts and intents and everything else happens under a certain degree of discomfort. You need to have perspective that sometimes you get a coach and the coach kind of pushes back on some thoughts and ideas. And that's where it's really helpful to have somebody like that, where they have an outside perspective, knowing that you're more likely to find ways to make it easy on yourself and avoid confrontation of necessary things than you are to lead yourself to them. You're more likely to confront people about their stuff than you are to confront yourself about your stuff. That's the tricky thing about being a manager or a leader. You're either going to do it yourself, or in order to just acknowledge that it's hard, surround yourself with people who will tell you the truth and decide ahead of time that you're going to listen. In some fashion, you've done that today by tuning into a podcast. You've probably listened to a YouTube video today that even while you're having your coffee, it really resonates with something that you're trying to convince yourself, that self that doesn't want to change but knows it needs to. You're trying to override that self-protected mechanism in order to get to the other side of some painful confrontation that is going to make you a better person, a better leader. And so all of that as a preamble, I think, is necessary to get yourself in the right frame of mind to think about the mind. To think about who you are when you show up to work is basically who you are on the inside. And eventually that's going to come out under pressure. All of that eventually comes out. So you want to attend to the right things. Think about this. It's the same thing as when you have bad coffee. If it's a bad extraction and you cover it up with a lot of syrup and sauce and stuff, you say, oh, nobody will notice. Well, you're building bad habits there, and eventually somebody will notice, right? But when we're talking about the mind, we're talking about the practice of leadership and management, you can fool some of the people some of the times, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And it's the people that you can't fool that eventually see what's really happening, and then the whole thing crumbles. That's why we really need to be working on ourselves as we work with people so we can serve them well. And it really helps the business because you can make better decisions when you have a clearer mind about the way you think. So let's talk about 4 things here. First off, I want you to replace informing with teaching or mentoring. See, the difference between informing people versus teaching or mentoring is a difference of time scale. So let's start by thinking about shifting from dealing with people to working with people, to getting to work with people, not having to. So the get to versus have to, the dealing with them versus the serving them. This is a shift of mindset that sees things as opportunities, not jail sentences. This is not something that you're having to muster up the courage to brave, and you're a victim because now you've got to deal with these people, as if at the end of it is this peaceful moment. You can never be happy unless you're not with those people. That's a shame, and it speaks to an area of who we are deeper than we'd care to admit. And if we don't shift our thinking to a more thankful, a more positive outward focus where we are embracing the opportunity to work with people as a privilege, not some kind of a punishment, then we will get better things in return. Mostly what you put out there is going to come back to you. And I see it time and time again. And the example I just gave before, when I talked about the onboarding documents that look like you're being onboarded into a jail, if you treat people badly, it's more likely that bad things will come back to you. Now, this isn't a one-for-one. Like, if you do really positive things all the time, that doesn't mean everything is going to come back to you positive. There's always going to be things that happen that you're either outside of your control. People will fool you and you'll hire the wrong person. It'll come back and you'll have to let them go. Stuff like that happens. But It's better to exercise a mindset and apprentice yourself to becoming the kind of person who is seeing people as people, not problems. And if you adopt that mindset, a lot of things will open up to you. And not the least of which is a certain sense of trust and of a mind that can see opportunities, who can see people's potential and call it out of them, instead of always seeing the negative and being having your reticular activating system always looking for the problems, the negative, the proof that you were right about how bad people are, that you need to deal with them and all this stuff. So that's a mindset shift right there. You're not dealing with people. You get to work with them. You get to serve them. And that is a big mindset shift that I would encourage you to take on. Now, neatly moving from that one to this next mindset shift, because they're kind of related. We need to stop thinking about training and equipping people as an informing event. We don't just inform people, we teach and mentor them. Yes, we're equipping them. Yes, we are informing them. But if you think about the difference between teaching and mentoring and equipping and informing, or just informing, I've informed you. Here, read the manual. You've read the manual. You're now informed. Are you really equipped? Are you prepared? Are you resourced properly? Probably not. And anybody who's done this whole rigmarole of read the manual, sign here, they know that that is just not effective. Down the line, they in their mind, they keep trying to think to themselves, well, they read it, so why aren't they doing it? But when was the last time you downloaded all that information like Neo in the Matrix? You just can't do it, because human brains don't work that way. Human beings don't work that way. We have to have dedicated, consistent investment over time, which you're probably not going to be willing to do if you didn't have that first mindset shift, because you already see them as a liability. So it's just untenable. Why would I spend that much time with them? But if you think of yourself as a teacher, as a mentor, as somebody who is developing people, if you've hired the right people, you want to do this. You want to work with them, and you really don't stop that mindset. See, this is kind of a time frame thing, where informing is a one-time event. It is a thing that happens, and once it's happened, and we're done. So this is really a time frame issue. On one hand, you have informing, which happens once, maybe twice. You read through it, and we're going to tell you what to do, etc. And that's it. You're done. But teaching and mentoring, it involves informing. That's part of it, but it's only a small part of it. Once you've informed people, now you've got to work with them to become the kind of people who take the information and turn it into habitual action. And not even just habitual action that's so deeply ingrained that it becomes cultural, that it becomes second nature. And at that level, now we can start improvising. Now we can start to get dynamic. And everyone wants that kind of culture. But everyone wants it by informing, but not teaching and mentoring. There's a real process to that mentorship teaching model. It requires patience. It requires positive view of people. It requires planning. But informing is sort of the cheap way out. And we try this with all sorts of avenues of technology or clever word crafting to buy ourselves a ticket out of the relationship that we have to have if we want a great coffee shop and a great team, which is to be mentors and teachers, versus just people who inform and then kind of abdicate our responsibility as leaders by shooing them off with their manuals and say, figure it out on your own, become something great without me, Now, the third mindset shift that we have to have as coffee leaders, as owners, as operators, as managers, is that we have to move from impressive to effective. The difference between these two words is huge. You've got impressive. Impressive is something that elicits a response from people right away. Now, it could be for good reasons, but sometimes impressive, and a lot of times impressive, is a pursuit that doesn't include effectiveness. When you choose the wrong bar top material, for example, because it looks beautiful, but it's bad in wet environments like a coffee bar, that impressive choice turns out to be impractical and ineffective. You could have a beautiful cafe that feels bad to be in when you start to feel the textures, the chairs are uncomfortable, or the bar is designed, it was beautiful to look at, but it's not got good workflow. And especially think about policies and manuals and other processes and checklists and stuff like this. You could have, and there are available, giant volumes of manuals that you could just plop down in front of people and you think, that's impressive. Wow, all that you need to run a coffee shop. Well, the joke's on you because we can't actually use all that stuff in the coffee shop until we understand our coffee shop. I'm a big advocate of minimum viable systems and effective choices, making the aesthetic of a business kind of the last thought in some ways. Not something poorly considered, but not the priority. What the priority should be is our bar design effective? Is our communication effective? Are we just wowed by the impressive features of a POS system or a scheduling software or some other thing that we're purchasing as an assist or something that's physical in our cafe that has a visual component that becomes the priority versus the functional component? So this stuff has to work. And if we don't have a mindset that puts functionality first and effectiveness first, that affects everything from communication to products to process and policy, all of that stuff. So the practice here is whatever you're about to decide on, ask yourself the question, am I impressed with this because it soothes a worry or an anxiety that I have about my business that is born from a lack of knowledge, and it's going to kind of come in and make it feel better but not really solve a problem? What problems do you know you have, and does it solve that problem? That's how you know something is effective. So if there are a lot of bells and whistles on something, those will promise to solve the problem of informing your staff of changes in policy because you've got a really, really cool seamless kind of AI generated communication board. This software looks really good. But the question is, why are you having trouble informing your staff about basic things? Is it because of the wrong sound when an alert goes off or rounded corners on a text box? Or is it because the leadership is simply not taking ownership over communication and is outsourcing it to technology in the first place? Maybe the problem we're chasing down with impressive things is more easily solved by unimpressive methods, but they're effective. So you might think, I would like to have my bar be impressive looking. But in order to do that, I've got to make some functionality and workflow sacrifices. Well, that's where your values lie, but don't complain later on when everybody's really tired. They don't want to upsell on things that are inconvenient to make because the workflow is not set up to do pour overs or to make the signature beverages that you wanted to create, which is a whole nother category of impressive things that are sometimes not effective. Let's start to replace our penchant for trying to find impressive things and instead pursue effectiveness. And the effectiveness can only be proven to be effective if we've got a grip on the problem. We're curious. We've asked questions. We've talked to the staff. What's the real issue with communication? What's the real issue with this policy or this workflow or quality control? And then we can find a solution. And that solution is going to be judged as worthy of adoption solely, really, because it's effective. So that's one mindset shift I think would be really great. And the last shift in our minds that we want to adopt to make our coffee shops better is to be preemptive and not be reactionary. Preemptive already assumes that there are going to be challenges, and we've got some idea of how we are going to respond. You can respond when you have a plan, when you've thought through What are the possible scenarios? Now, some things will be coming at you like, oh, that I never saw that coming. You can simply respond to the best of your ability based on who you know you are and the solutions that you've already got in place, and you can grow from there. But reactivity or being reactionary is sometimes a detriment, and actually a lot of times a detriment, because most of the responses when you're reactionary are ill-considered. We rush our responses. We rush to fix a problem without knowing anything about the problem. And sometimes we'll make the problem worse if we try to create peace between coworkers, not knowing the full story and not being curious and talking it through and being calm. Or even before starting a coffee shop, knowing that you're going to have to engage in conflict resolution. That's the ultimate boss move right there. That's high level stuff. If you already know, hey, I want to open a coffee shop, what can I do to help me be prepared for conflict between staff? I got to tell you, I hardly ever hear anybody ask that question. In fact, I don't even think I've heard that question once. Most people want to know what? They want to know, what espresso machine should I buy? What should I do for my bar design? What menu items really sell? But the things that make or break a coffee shop are barely ever thought about. But they're responded to in the moment as inconveniences, annoyances, and they make us mad. They make us reactionary. And so we jump down the throat of whoever it is that's daring to show us that we weren't prepared for this, right? So and tell me, when you're reactionary, does that ever result in a methodology that everybody adopts in the future to eliminate that problem? No, it's basically like, can y'all just shut up and stop doing that? All right, great. Let's move on. That's not a solution. That's not professional. And professionals are preemptive. Professionals think through, what if this happens? You know, when you go to compete in a barista competition, I did this years ago in US Barista Championships and elsewhere. You've got to think through the scenarios based on the lay of the land in front of you. Y'all, it's not that mysterious what happens in a coffee shop. You could spend a couple of hours in a coffee shop and watch what happens. That's going to be your life. It's not a mystery. And we like to pretend it is because we get obsessed about the stuff we talked about before, which is the impressive stuff. But our preemptive planning is not effective because we're thinking about the impressive stuff. We're not considering the real challenges of running a coffee shop. So what we need to do is decide that we are going to be measured, creative, curious, patient, and planful in the way that we operate our cafes. You've got to think, okay, here's what'll happen if this happens. And so it might not be sufficient, but at least you've got something. And that soothes the anxiety in you in the moment because you've got a touch point. And then you can learn and then you can grow. But if all you do is fly in blind and then react when something hits you, it's kind of like those games where they where the person is putting their hands in a box and they can't see what's on the inside. And their mind just fills in this lack of knowledge with the worst possible thing. Everyone on the other side of the box sees that it's just like a stuffed animal. But to them, they're thinking this fuzzy thing could be mold. It could be some rotting piece of fruit. And they're just like, oh, I don't want to touch it. And we're laughing because we know it's not actually as bad as they think it is. But they think it's bad because they lack sight. They lack knowledge. That's why you need to go out there and see and hear and listen and plan. All of the stuff that you're going to deal with has already been done many, many times. And you can be such a great preemptive leader based on just the history, the public history of coffee shops today. So let's not be reactive. Let's be preemptive instead. So these are the 4 things I wanted to talk about today. I'm sure there's plenty more, not this, but that conversations we can have, but this is plenty. Okay. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If you want to reach out for coaching and consulting, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. I work one-on-one with coffee shop owners to help them make their coffee shops better and to help them start their coffee shop on the right foot. Go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of our show. Thanks everybody so much for your time. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.